A trail of ash led them back to a tent that wasn't theirs. They noticed it after the fire burned low. Not at first. At first it was just the usual end of night routine. Embers settling into a dull, breathing red. The forest dimming into a uniform dark. The temperature dropping in that slow, creeping way that settles into your sleeves and collar without asking. Caleb was the one who stood up first. I'm grabbing more wood, he said, brushing ash from his palms as he stepped away from the fire ring. Nina didn't look up from where she sat, knees drawn to her chest. There's a pile right there. He shook his head. That's damp. I want something dry. You'll wake everything out there, she muttered. Nothing's out there, he said. It wasn't true, and they both knew it. Even a quiet forest has presence, subtle sounds that prove it's alive. But tonight, that presence felt thinned. Not gone, but distant. As if the forest had shifted a step further away from them. Caleb paused at the edge of the firelight. Do you smell that? He asked. Nina frowned. Smoke. No. Different. Like burned wood, but not ours. She inhaled slowly. It was there, faint but distinct. A dry, powdery scent layered beneath the sharper smoke of their fire. Older. Colder. It's probably someone else's site, she said. There's no one else out here. Then an old fire pit. Wind carried it. Caleb didn't answer. He stepped forward, past the reach of the firelight. His boot pressed into something soft. He looked down. Ash. Not scattered randomly. Not the way wind carries residue, but in a narrow, defined line. A trail. Hey, he said. Come here. Nina hesitated, then stood, brushing off her jeans. She crossed to him, stopping just short of the dark. What is it? He pointed. The ash lay in a thin ribbon across the forest floor, cutting through the natural layer of leaves and soil. It didn't blend in, it sat on top, pale and deliberate, like something placed rather than left behind. That's not from our fire, she said. No. The line extended beyond the reach of their light, disappearing into the trees. Nina glanced back at their campsite, the low fire, their tent, the small, contained world they'd set up hours earlier. We should just leave it, she said. Caleb shook his head. It's fresh. How can you tell? He crouched, pinching a bit between his fingers. It's dry, but it hasn't settled. Look. No debris on top. No leaves. She looked. He was right. The ash sat undisturbed, as if it had been placed there recently. Okay, she said. So someone else is out here. Then we should know where. Nina exhaled slowly. Or we mind our business. But she was already stepping closer. The line of ash didn't just sit on the ground, it followed a path. Not a human trail, not something worn into the earth, but a direction. It curved slightly between trees, avoiding thicker undergrowth, threading through the forest with quiet intent. Caleb stood. I'm going to follow it. Of course you are, Nina said. She looked back at the campsite again. The fire seemed smaller now. The shadows deeper. Fine, she said. But we don't go far. They grabbed their flashlights. The beams cut through the dark in narrow cones, illuminating the ash trail in stark contrast against the forest floor. It didn't scatter under the light. It didn't shift. It simply existed, waiting. The forest changed as they followed it. Not dramatically, not in a way you could point to and say this is different, but in subtle accumulations. The air cooled faster than it should have. The ground grew softer in places, then harder in others, as if the layers beneath it were uneven. The sounds, the few that remained, grew inconsistent. A branch would creak once, then not again. A distant rustle would begin and stop abruptly. Do you hear that? Nina asked at one point. Caleb paused. What? That's the thing. It keeps stopping. He listened. She was right. The forest wasn't silent, but its sounds didn't sustain. They started and ended too cleanly, as if something were allowing them briefly, then cutting them off. Maybe it's just us, he said. Yeah, she replied. Maybe. The ash trail continued. It didn't thin or break. If anything, it became more defined. The line widened slightly, the edges sharper, as if whatever had made it had pressed more firmly into the ground. Why ash? Nina asked. Caleb shrugged. Fire. Someone carrying it, Maybe. Why would anyone carry ash through the woods? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good answer. The trail curved again, leading them between two large trees whose trunks leaned inward slightly, narrowing the space. As they passed through, Nina felt it. A shift. Like stepping across an invisible boundary. The air on the other side was colder. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. Did you feel that? She asked. Caleb nodded. Yeah. He didn't elaborate. They both understood. Something had changed. The ash trail brightened under their flashlights. Not in actual brightness, but in clarity. The particles seemed more defined, less like residue and more like something structured. Nina crouched. It's not just ash, she said. What do you mean? Look closer. Caleb knelt beside her. The particles weren't uniform. Some were larger, flaked. Others were finer. But beneath that, shapes. Tiny fragments. Edges too sharp to be random. This looks like burned fabric, Nina said. And that? Caleb pointed. Wood, maybe. Or bone. They both went quiet. The trail continued. They stood. Not far, Nina said again. Not far, Caleb agreed. They saw the tent before they realized it wasn't theirs. At first, it was just a shape in the darkness, a familiar outline among the trees, catching the beam of Caleb's flashlight at the edge of its range. See, he said. Another campsite. Relief flickered briefly. Human presence. Something normal. But as they got closer, that relief thinned. The tent stood alone. No fire. No gear. No movement. The fabric was dark, blending into the forest, but the ash trail led directly to it, stopping just short of the entrance. Nina slowed. That's not right. Caleb didn't respond. He stepped closer. The tent looked standard enough. Two-person, dome style, but something about it felt off. The angles were slightly wrong. The fabric pulled tighter in some places, looser in others, as if it had been pitched incorrectly. Hello, Caleb called. His voice didn't carry. It moved a short distance, then seemed to lose strength, fading too quickly. No response. He stepped closer still. Hey, nothing. Nina's chest tightened. Caleb. He reached out and touched the fabric. It was cold. Not just cool from the night air, cold in a deeper way, like something that hadn't held warmth for a long time. This isn't ours, he said. Obviously, Nina replied. No. I mean, he hesitated. Then unzipped the entrance. The sound was too loud. Sharp. Uncontained. It seemed to cut through the forest rather than blend into it. The flap opened. Caleb shined his light inside. And froze. What? Nina asked. He didn't answer. She stepped forward, looking past him. The interior of the tent was wrong. Not empty. Not occupied. Rearranged. Sleeping bags lay inside, but not in the way people leave them. They were folded, then unfolded, then folded again, layers misaligned. A backpack sat in the corner, but it was open, its contents shifted, items half removed and then pushed back in at odd angles. Everything looked used, but not by someone who understood how it was meant to be used. This feels like, Nina started. Someone copied it, Caleb finished. Yeah. They stepped back. The ash trail behind them remained unbroken, leading directly from their campsite to this one. Let's go back, Nina said. Yeah. They turned and stopped. The ash trail didn't go back the way they'd come. It extended further, past them, continuing into the forest behind the tent. That's not, Caleb said. We followed it here, Nina said. It should end here. It doesn't. The line stretched onward, thicker now, more defined, as if reinforced. Nina's stomach tightened. Something made this, she said. And it's still going. The forest creaked. Not loudly. Just enough. A single, subtle shift of wood under tension. They both turned toward the tent. The fabric moved. Not from wind. From within. A slight inward pull. Then stillness. Caleb stepped back. Did you see that? Yes. The zipper. It moved. Not fully. Just a fraction. As if something inside had brushed against it. We need to go, Nina said. Caleb nodded. They turned again. The path behind them was still there, but it looked different. Narrower. The spaces between trees slightly altered. The ash trail no longer aligned with their footsteps. It curved away. Guiding. Don't follow it, Nina said. I'm not. But their feet hesitated. Because the forest itself felt resistant. The ground underfoot shifted slightly, encouraging a different direction. Toward the trail. Just walk straight, Nina said. They did. Or tried to. But the terrain changed. Subtly at first. A route where there hadn't been one. A slight incline. The line of least resistance shifted. And with it, their path. They corrected. Adjusted. But each time, the forest compensated. Redirecting. Guiding. Until they realized. They were following the ash again. Without meaning to. It's leading us, Caleb said. To what? Nina asked. He didn't answer. Because the trail curved again. And this time, it led them back to their own campsite. Or what should have been their campsite. The fire was there. Low. Flickering. But the arrangement was wrong. The logs weren't where they had left them. The coals had shifted. And the tent. Nina's breath caught. That's not ours. It wasn't. It looked like theirs. Same model. Same color. But the angles were off. The fabric pulled wrong. The entrance slightly misaligned. The ash trail led directly to it. Stopping just short. Mirroring the other one. No. Nina said. No. Caleb echoed. They stood there, staring. The fire crackled softly. Too softly. The light it cast seemed thinner, less substantial. What do we do? Nina asked. Caleb swallowed. We check. Caleb. We have to. He stepped forward. Slowly. Each movement deliberate. The ground felt different here. Less stable. Like it had been disturbed. The ash line lay at his feet. Perfect. Unbroken. He reached for the zipper. Hesitated. Then pulled. The sound was wrong again. Too loud. Too sharp. The flap opened. He shined his light inside. And this time, he didn't freeze. He recoiled. What is it? Nina asked, her voice tight. He didn't answer. So she stepped closer. Looked inside. And understood. The tent wasn't empty. It wasn't rearranged. It was occupied. But not by people. Not exactly. Two shapes lay inside the sleeping bags. Rough approximations. Formed from ash. Packed together into the suggestion of bodies. Their outlines wrong. Their proportions slightly off. As if something had tried to replicate them. From memory. From observation. But hadn't gotten it right. Nina stepped back. No. The shapes shifted. Not rising. Not moving. But settling. As if responding to the attention. The ash trail at their feet thickened. New particles appearing, layering over the old. The forest creaked again. Louder now. More trees. More tension. It's still making them, Caleb said. Making. What? Places. Nina looked around. The forest no longer felt like a space between things. It felt like a system. A process. The ash. The tents. The rearranged objects. It's copying us, she said. No, Caleb said. It's replacing us. The shapes inside the tent shifted again. One of them raised slightly. Not fully forming. Just enough to suggest motion. The zipper moved. Slowly. From the inside. Nina grabbed Caleb's arm. We're leaving. Now. They turned. And ran. This time, the forest didn't resist. It opened. Paths clearing just enough. The ground smoothing underfoot. Guiding them. Away. But the ash trail. It followed. Appearing ahead of them. Reforming under their steps. Leading. Not back. Forward. Toward somewhere else. And as they ran, Caleb glanced back. Just once. The tent behind them. The one that wasn't theirs. Had changed. The shapes inside were clearer now. More defined. Closer to human. And at the entrance, another figure stood. Not fully formed. Not stable. But watching. Waiting. As if ready to step out. As if ready to take their place. Their campfire cast shadows that whispered. At first, it sounded like the wood settling. A soft, irregular murmur beneath the steady crackle of the fire, too faint to distinguish, too inconsistent to follow. It slipped between the sharper sounds of burning bark and shifting embers, dissolving whenever either of them tried to focus on it directly. Ravi noticed it before he said anything. He sat on a flat stone near the edge of the firelight, elbows resting on his knees, watching the flames work through the last of the thicker logs. Across from him, Cato was tightening the zipper on his jacket, shoulders hunched slightly against the creeping cold. You hear that? Ravi asked. Kato didn't look up. Hear what? Ravi tilted his head, listening. The murmur was there again. Low. Close. Not quite separate from the fire, but not part of it either. That, he said. Kato paused, then sat still. They both listened. The forest was quiet. Too quiet for this time of night. No insects, no wind, no distant movement. Just the fire, and beneath it, something softer. A whisper. Kato exhaled slowly. It's the fire. No, Ravi said. It's not. The distinction mattered, though he couldn't explain why yet. The whispering faded again, swallowed by a sharper crack as one of the logs split and shifted inward. Kato leaned back slightly, looking around the clearing. It's just the way sound carries out here, he said. No other noise to mask it. Ravi didn't respond. He was watching the shadows. The firelight cast them long and uneven across the ground, stretching them toward the trees that ringed their small campsite. The trunks stood tall and still, absorbing most of the light, leaving the shadows to pool and overlap in the spaces between. They moved, of course. Firelight always does that, but these movements felt delayed. A flicker in the flame, then a fraction of a second later, the shadow shifted. Too late. As if something had to decide how to move before it did. You see that? Ravi said. Kato followed his gaze. The shadow of a branch extended across the ground, thin and jagged. The actual branch above them was still, unmoving in the windless air. The shadow twitched. A small, precise adjustment. Kato frowned. Okay. That's. The whisper returned. Clearer this time. Still too faint to make out words, but distinct enough to separate from the fire. Ravi's shoulders tightened. That's not wood, he said. Kato stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. Probably just echo. The trees. No. Ravi's voice cut sharper than he intended. Kato looked at him. What? It's not coming from the trees, Ravi said. Then where? Ravi pointed. At the ground. At the shadows. They listened again. The whispering rose slightly. Not louder, but more present. Layered. Multiple voices, overlapping just enough to blur together. Kato crouched near the edge of the firelight. That's, he began. He didn't finish, because the shadows shifted again. This time, not in response to the fire. One of them moved independently. A long shape stretched outward, then pulled back slightly, like a breath. The flame didn't change. The branch above didn't move. Only the shadow. Okay. Kato said quietly. Okay. That's new. Ravi didn't reply. He was listening. The whispering was clearer now. Still indistinct, but forming patterns. Cadence. Like speech heard through a wall. Do you hear that? Ravi asked. Kato nodded slowly. Yeah. What does it sound like to you? Kato hesitated. Like people, he said. Ravi swallowed. Yeah. They sat in silence for a while after that. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved closer to the fire. The shadows continued their subtle shifts, stretching and contracting at their own pace. The whispering persisted, sometimes fading almost completely, sometimes rising just enough to suggest structure. Ravi tried to focus on it, to isolate a word, a phrase, but every time he thought he had something, it slipped away, dissolving back into a low, overlapping murmur. It's probably just our brains filling in patterns, Kato said eventually. Ravi didn't look at him. You don't believe that? Kato didn't answer. The fire popped sharply. A small burst of sparks rose, briefly illuminating the clearing more brightly. For a fraction of a second, the shadows sharpened. And in that instant, they weren't aligned. The shadows didn't match their sources. A tree cast two shadows. One angled correctly, the other slightly off. Ravi blinked. The light settled. The shadows returned to their previous positions. Did you see that? He asked. Kato nodded once. Yeah. The whispering changed. Subtly. The cadence tightened. The overlap reduced. As if something were adjusting. Learning. Ravi felt a slow, creeping unease settle into his chest. It's getting clearer, he said. Kato didn't respond. He was staring at a patch of shadow near the fire. It had gathered more densely than the others, pooling in a shallow depression in the ground. The edges were too defined. Too deliberate. Ravi, he said. Ravi followed his gaze. The shadow moved. Not flickering. Not shifting. Sliding. A few inches to the left. Then stopping. The fire didn't change. The surrounding shadows didn't follow. Only that one. That's not how this works, Kato said. No, Ravi agreed. The whispering rose again. This time, there were words. Not clear. Not complete. But fragments. You. Here. There. Ravi's breath caught. Did you? Yes, Kato said quickly. They both leaned in slightly, as if proximity might clarify the sound. The shadow near the fire stretched upward, thinning as it elongated. Then it settled back down. The whispering continued. Closer. Listen. You. Kato stood up abruptly. No, he said. No, that's not. The shadows reacted. All at once. They stilled. Every one of them. Perfectly. The fire continued to flicker. But the shadows did not respond. They held their positions, fixed and unmoving. The whispering stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Ravi felt it press against his ears. His chest. Don't move, he said. Kato froze mid-step. They waited. Seconds stretched. Nothing happened. Then, the shadows resumed. But not as before. They moved together now. In slow, synchronized shifts that did not match the fire's erratic light. And the whispering returned. Clearer. Closer. Ravi. He flinched. Kato's head snapped toward him. Did it just? Yes. Ravi. The voice was unmistakable now. Not fully formed, but recognizable. Familiar. Ravi's throat tightened. That's not. He started. You hear us. The words were clearer. Distinct. And wrong. Kato stepped back. No. No. We're not doing this. Kato. His name. The sound came from the same place. The shadows. From the ground. From the space between them. Kato shook his head. This is. No. This is just. You came back. Ravi's stomach dropped. Back. He said. We didn't. You always do. The shadows stretched toward them. Not reaching. Not touching. Just aligning. Pointing. Every time. Kato grabbed his pack. We're leaving. Ravi didn't argue. They moved quickly, stepping away from the fire. The moment they left its immediate light, the whispering surged. Louder. More urgent. Don't go. Stay. You always stay. The shadows followed. Not physically, but appearing ahead of them. Cast from nothing. Forming shapes that shouldn't exist without light. Don't look at them, Kato said. Ravi tried, but the movement drew his attention. A shadow crossed in front of him. There was no object casting. It. You remember. The words pressed closer. Clearer. The first time, Ravi stopped. Kato grabbed his arm. Don't. But Ravi was already looking back. At the fire. The clearing looked wrong. Not just empty. Altered. The arrangement of stones was slightly off. The logs in the fire were placed differently. And the shadows. There were more of them than before. Ravi. Kato said, his voice tight. We didn't come here before. You did. The whisper came from directly behind him. Close. Too close. You always do. Ravi turned. The shadow behind him didn't match his shape. It stood taller. Wider. And its head tilted at an angle he wasn't making. Kato stepped back slowly. We need to go. Now. You leave. You forget. You come back. The cadence was steady now. Confident. As if something had finally found the right words. And we remember. Ravi felt something shift in his chest. A memory. Not clear. Not complete. But present. A fire. This clearing. Voices. Laughter. Then. Nothing. A gap. Kato shook his head. No. No. That's not real. It is. The shadows stretched further. Merging. Overlapping. Forming shapes that no longer resembled trees or branches. We are what's left. Ravi's breath came shallow. What do you mean? When the fire goes out. Kato's grip tightened on his arm. Don't listen. We stay. The fire behind them flickered. Lower. Weaker. You don't. Ravi turned again. The flames were dying. Faster than they should. The wood collapsing inward, embers dimming rapidly. No. Kato said. No. We just lit that. You always think that. The shadows surged. Filling the clearing. Reaching the edges of the trees. And beyond. But you don't remember the end. Ravi's vision blurred. Not from darkness. From something else. A pressure. A shift. This is the end. The fire guttered, collapsed. The last flame flickered once. Twice. Then went out. Darkness swallowed the clearing. Total. Absolute. And in that darkness, the whispering didn't stop. It deepened. Surrounded them. Filled the space where light had been. Now we begin again. Ravi couldn't see Kato. Couldn't see anything. But he felt something beside him. Close. Breathing. Stay. The word pressed into him. Not spoken. Felt. And somewhere, in the space where memory should have been, something aligned. Something familiar. The fire. The clearing. The same conversation. The same moment. Over and over. And as the darkness settled fully, Ravi understood. The shadows didn't whisper to them. They whispered from them. What was left behind. Every time the fire went out,